Hello, welcome to Cooking with Chris. Turns out I have a little family gathering tomorrow, so I'm putting together my dish. I'm making a little Sunday seafood gumbo, and it's a long, laborious dish to make. So I did a lot of the grunt work before I started the video. But I'll go over some of the things I've already done with you. And that way it'll shorten the amount of time we have to spend with each other. So if you look here, you'll see everything that I've done. And a few things you need to know about gumbo is it's got to have a few things. One of the main things a gumbo has to have, and it's still cooking as we speak, is a black roux. You can see this roux is already quite dark. I'm going to let it get a little darker before I add the vegetables to it. So a dark roux is just a flour and butter mixture that's been stirred together for a very long time until my chicken stock overflowed the pot a little bit. So just put that fire out for a sec. But I want the stock nice and hot, so when I incorporate it into the gumbo, it'll already be hot, and that'll also lessen the amount of time for the video. So the other thing that a gumbo needs to have is what's called the Holy Trinity. And the Holy Trinity is the mirepoix that goes into a gumbo. Traditionally, most soups and sauces and like stews and stuff in Western cooking is made with a mirepoix of onion, celery, and carrot. But in Louisiana, they didn't have carrots, so they came up with their own mirepoix mixture of onion, celery, and green pepper. Bell pepper. There's a mixture of a couple different kinds of peppers I got from my brother's garden. So this is the Holy Trinity here that we're going to use for our gumbo. Another thing a gumbo I think needs to have is some okra. I already boiled this okra. Okra is they call it lady fingers in Asia. And it's a very viscous vegetable. If you've ever worked with it, you'll see that after you cook it, when you rinse it, this like mucus just keeps coming off of it. But I assure you it's very delicious, and we're going to add this to our gumbo too. We have cooked chorizo. I cooked it earlier. I also deglazed the pan and added that to the stock I have boiling over here. And the oil that was in the bottom of the pan is also being used to make this black roux. And then I have some clams that I steamed and rinsed so there wouldn't be any sand that would be incorporated into the soup. I wouldn't want anybody to break their tooth or anything like that. These are black mussels, local mussels, and I did the same thing with them. I steamed them till they opened, I rinsed them out, and before I did all that, I also washed the outsides of the shells really well. Here we have some pink Gulf shrimp. I'm going to keep those raw and add them at the end. I have a little bit of tomato product. There's a bit of a debate between Creole and Cajun gumbo. The Creole gumbo usually adds a little bit of tomato product, and it usually has seafood and okra. Whereas the Cajun gumbo doesn't use tomato product and often has chicken in it. I like to think once you have your gumbo base, which is what we're going to make together right now, you can really add anything to it. Like I'm making a seafood and sausage gumbo, but you can easily make a chicken and shrimp gumbo, or you can make a squirrel gumbo, or you can make a rabbit gumbo, whatever you want to make. Once you have the Holy Trinity, the black roux, the okra, all those things incorporated into the base of the gumbo, Then you just add your protein. You can even make a vegetarian gumbo, for example, with maybe mushrooms. I've never done that. Sounds like a good idea. Maybe for another episode. I'm thinking the roux is about ready right now. Now when you cook, I was talking about the roux before. You cook this very slowly as not to overcook it. And you might ask, well, why do you make the roux so dark? Well, there's a couple reasons for that. And I'll go over those in a second. We need to start adding some of the vegetables to the roux. We'll start with the onion, because I like to cook a little bit longer than the pepper and the celery. And this roux is so hot, steaming hot. Like if you got it on your skin, it would burn. It's not going to take too long to cook those onions. And then we'll add the celery and the peppers. We'll let that cook a little bit, and then you'll see as we go. So to give you a look at what the onion and roux mixture looks like now, you can see that. So I was talking about the roux before, the two reasons why you make a black roux. Number one, the longer you cook the roux, the less thickening power it has. So you're not, you're going to see later that I'm just going to add the stock to this, and it's going to thicken to just the right amount. Where if this was a blonder roux, a lighter colored roux, it would thicken so much that it would be like a paste, right? So by cooking this roux for as long as I've taken out a lot of the thickening power. The other reason is, if you were in my kitchen, you could smell it. The aroma is like nuts. It's like a very nutty aroma and flavor that it adds to the soup. It's intense, actually. And I don't know if you've ever had gumbo before, but one of the things I like to say when I talk about gumbo is nothing tastes like gumbo. I can't tell you that, it tastes a little bit like this, because it really is a unique dish. So the onions are cooked enough. I'm going to turn up the flame a little bit, and then I'm going to add the peppers and the celery, the rest of the holy trinity, to the pot. And we're going to let that cook for a few minutes before we add the stock. And I'll let you have another look at that in a second. So yeah, it's just got this incredible nutty flavor and aroma that I think comes through in the soup and probably adds to the uniqueness of the flavor of a gumbo. I'm going to go ahead and add the sausage right now too, because a lot of the flavor from this particular gumbo is going to come from the sausage, and I just want that flavor to really get in there and macerate with the rest of everything. I'm going to say probably about a couple minutes. We'll add a little bit of white wine. Not everybody does that, but for my gumbo, I want to create the maximum amount of flavor for the base part of the gumbo, so the protein won't have to do that much work. So I'll add a little bit of wine, and unlike a lot of people, I guess it's a Jersey thing, I add a little chopped garlic. I think garlic makes everything better. Since that's chopped so small, I'm going to add that to the black roux last, because that's not going to take much time to cook at all. Now you're probably wondering what this pot looks like at this point. So it looks like a black vegetable sausage mess, but already the flavors and smells are mixing up in there to create that intense, unique gumbo flavor. So I'm talking a little fast right now because I want things to kind of move along at a quick pace. I'm going to turn the chicken stock back up so that's really hot when I add it to the soup. And almost the second I add the stock to this, it's going to thicken to just the right consistency. Now you might ask, why am I making the gumbo tonight if the party's tomorrow? Anybody knows anything about gumbo, it's one of those dishes that tastes better the next day. So I could have easily woken up tomorrow morning and made it, but I want it to be able to sit overnight and just simmer in its flavor, and tomorrow it'll be, I wouldn't say twice as good as today, but a lot better than it is today. I think we're almost ready to add a little bit of wine to that. So you'll see when I add this wine how quickly the wine just gets absorbed into the black roux and thickens when I mix it. It should turn to almost like a paste. If you could see that, I hope. See, it almost looks like a chili at this point. And some of the other things I'm going to add to the gumbo are bay leaves, crushed red pepper, ground black pepper, little kosher salt. Again, I'm going to add the shrimp, the clams, and the mussels. So here, I think we're ready to add the stock to the gumbo. We're just going to add that whole pot right in there. We're not going to worry about, is it going to thicken too much? Is it going to thicken too little? You can always thicken it a little more if you had to. My thoughts are you will not have to. The black roux will thicken it just enough. So that's a little bit thick. It's not like a cream soup super thick. It's not like a Manhattan clam chowder that's really thin. But another thing that adds a little thickening to the soup is the okra. Remember I said before that it's quite viscous after you cook it. It's like almost like a slime, and no matter how much you wash it, it just keeps coming off. I don't know the science behind it, but that will also help to create the consistency that a gumbo has. Now you can see, because everything was hot, this gumbo is already boiling. It's already thickening. The flavors are already mixing around. The whole house smells like heavenly. It's just a wonderful thing. So at this point, I'll let that cook a little bit more. We'll add 1 or 2 bay leaves. What would a proper Louisiana dish be without a couple bay leaves? I guess I'm taking the Creole style of Cajun. This is really my own recipe, but so I add a little bit of tomato product, and it's to add a little acid to the dish, and it's also to add some color to the dish. So it's not really for flavor, although it probably adds a little bit of flavor. And so now normally this dish would take hours to make. I would say at this point the base of the gumbo is essentially done. It needs to simmer for quite some time to get to the flavor, consistency, and color that I want. But you can see here, so this is basically your gumbo base. I'm going to let that cook for a couple more minutes, and then at the end I add the seafood. The seafood I add last. If you put the seafood in first, it'll cook too much and turn to rubber. So especially the clams and the mussels, they're already cooked. The shrimp is raw, but it's going to cook in the gumbo and add even more flavor to it. So at this point, I'll add a pinch of red pepper flakes. I'll add some black pepper. And a wee bit of salt. The okra, like I said, will also add to the thickening and texture of the soup. And at this point, I'll add the shrimp. And then I'll let this simmer for about half an hour before I add the mussels and the clams. So I'm not